I am single right now, and I've done some pretty weird things to like try to find a boyfriend. And I don't mean stuff in the bedroom. I mean, I almost started working for Greenpeace once because of a guy. Hello, everyone. My name is Lilly Cohen, and I'm here to introduce you to another episode of TN2M's Sit Down Stand Up Comedy Show. If you like what you've seen today, hit subscribe and like below and leave any comments. So, just to get us started, I have a good news for the women watching. Science finally is starting to care about our bodies and our health, and it's starting to be studied for real. So, for those of you who don't know, essentially the past 200 years of science has just been all the research, all the testing done on white men, and then those results are just applied across the board to everyone regardless. What could go wrong, right? So, doctors are finally starting to realize that in order to diagnose a woman properly, you need something brighter than a gaslight and you need a prescription that's not weight loss. However, with this, finally coming to light and finally being dressed, I do think there are some gentlemen in their 60s and 70s in Miami, Florida, and other beach towns that deserve an apology, okay? Because when they were wearing the shirts that said FBI, Female Body Inspector, they were probably just trying to raise awareness for this issue. I think if we had taken the time to talk to them, they would have just been like, yeah, we don't know what heart attacks look like in women because all the research is done in men and women are dying and it's really, really horrible. Anyway, now that we've gotten that out of the way, why don't you take your shirt off for me? We need to go over the self check breast exam. I do think that's how that conversation would have gone if we'd given them the chance. There are a lot of inspirational quotes out there that I think are pretty interesting, some a little bit more inspiring than others. One of my favorites is a quote that goes, "Nothing in life is to be feared, only understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less." That quote is by the incomparable Marie Curie, who died of radiation poisoning as a direct result of her science. So it's like, understanding's great. She could have used a little bit more fear, I think. There's another quote that I enjoy. It's not a quote per se, but it's this picture of this kind of granola looking woman holding a sign. And it says, "If we each grow a large crop of different food, we could all trade with each other and eat for practically free." First of all, gardening supplies don't grow on trees. And second of all, what she's describing is basically agriculture and basic economy. It's like that's how all of this started. Um, Another thing I see along those same lines are people kind of idealizing like pre-societal past, where they're like, I could be sunning myself in a meadow right now, but no, I have to go to work in a cubicle and pay taxes. It's like, yeah, they didn't have taxes back then. But you know what else they didn't have? They didn't have antibiotics, running water, Trader Joe's, matcha lattes, or bottomless brunch. Okay, you wouldn't have survived that for 5 minutes, Jessica. Another class of quotes that I see a lot are quotes that talk about life without regret. Oh, live life without regret, take the chance, blah, blah, blah. And I get what they're going for, but as someone who has made a fair amount of progress in the last year, I'm pretty sure I can safely say that the life without regrets quote is not accurate. It should be called life with different regrets. Okay? Let me share with you a few examples of what I mean. So I was working dead-end jobs for a while and I finally took the plunge and I went back to school. Isn't that great? Only problem, when you go to school, they expect you to study and write papers. And I often find myself up in the middle of the night, the exam tomorrow or the deadline, just racking my brain, being like, who would make me do this? And it's like, I did. I made me do this. The other thing I did was I started doing stand up comedy. Isn't that great? Well, the thing about stand up comedy is you have to stand up and do comedy in front of people. And I have a tremendous amount of stage fright. And it's like, who would make me do this? Again, I made me do this, you know? The third thing is I have been taking a little bit better care of myself. I've been eating better, I've been exercising a bit more. You know how I can tell that I've lost weight? It's because my tits have gotten smaller. All right? Pretty much the worst case scenario. They're getting smaller and sadder, decreasing in size and in altitude. Different regrets is all I'm saying. Being in school, I'm in my late 20s, and for the most part, we're all kind of doing the same thing, but occasionally the early 20, mid 20 naivete of my classmates does kind of shine through. So we had a little like party at the end of last year, and I was talking to some of the girls, and I'm like, I might have to leave after this. I think I have a date scheduled. And they go, that's exciting. And in my head, I was just like, I can't be the one to ruin this for them. You know, the date did actually go better than I expected. He canceled at the last minute. So that was a win. I have been on some pretty weird dates and like some pretty weird movies. I was talking to a guy about this, the weirdest movies that we've seen on dates, and I had a pretty good one. Okay, so I went to see The Purge on a date when I was in high school. And The Purge is one of those like thriller horror movies where there's no laws for 24 hours, so everyone's trying to kill each other and it's like chaos and mayhem. And I thought that's about the weirdest one you could find, but this guy had me beat because he is a black man and he went to see the movie Get Out on a date. And he told me that, and I was like, was it with a white girl by any chance? And completely unbothered, he was just like, yeah, it was. And I'm like, didn't that bother you? Like, I can just imagine being in the car after that movie, just kind of nervously glancing over at the girl, just being like, so listen, babe, like, we can wait on meeting my parents. You know, there's no rush. But he seemed pretty unbothered by it. And to me, that would be like if I went to see the movie Taken on a date with an Albanian man. Okay? And just for a little bit of background, the reason that I know that the villain in Taken was an Albanian man was because when I was 18 years old, I went with a friend of mine to Europe and we were out having drinks and some guys came up to us and we were talking and everything was great until they were like, oh, you're two young American girls traveling in Europe. That's so funny because we're Albanian like the guys from Taken. Like, can you imagine? Like, we just listened to that and we were just like, oh, that's so interesting. So we gotta go. Bye. And they were like, oh, we can walk you to your hotel. Where is it? And they were like, oh, we don't know. Bye. Sorry. Bye. And we got out of there as quickly as humanly possible. But I have thought about it. And it's like, if I were Taken, something like that did happen to me, I think I'd be gone, you know, because my dad's particular set of skills, it's Peloton, it's video editing, and it's pulling hamstrings. All right. And none of those things would be any help whatsoever if I were in any sort of trouble. I am single right now, and I've done some pretty weird things to like try to find a boyfriend. And I don't mean stuff in the bedroom. I mean, I almost started working for Greenpeace once because of a guy. So essentially how that happened was I was living in New York City and the canvassers were out on the street. And most of the time when they come up to you, I'm just like, no, sorry, bye. Or like, I don't acknowledge, whatever. But this guy was really good looking. So suddenly I did have time to talk about the environment. And I was like, oh my God, that's so sad about the pandas. I wasn't paying attention to what he was saying. That wasn't what I was interested in. But after that whole conversation, he was like, oh my God, you're so charismatic. Like, you should totally work for us and like approach strangers and ask them for money, which like sounds like one of the worst jobs in the world for anyone. And for an introvert, that's a living nightmare. Like, I've thought about it, and it's like if I had ended up taking that job, I think that summer would have ended with me like breaking into the zoo and like choking out a penguin. Like, I don't think I would have been able to maintain my sanity. Okay. There was another time when I was living in New York that I went on a date with a guy and I was not very interested in it. And then he mentioned that he had Hamilton tickets. Now, in my defense, it was the original Hamilton in New York City with Lin-Manuel Miranda. And I just watched my personality do a complete 180. Okay, suddenly I was super interested in everything he had to say because I was not throwing away my shot. All right, that is a Hamilton reference that I had to Google because I did not get to see Hamilton. Okay, I'm pretty sure he saw what was going on and ran as far away as he could, as fast as he could, which was the right thing to do. I didn't get to see Hamilton after that date, but what I did get out of that interaction was just learning that I have a price, right? Which is a very humbling thing to realize. But yeah, like I said, lived in New York, went to college there, and being in college in New York was an interesting experience because the security in the buildings was understandably increased compared to other college dorms. Like we couldn't just swipe in, it wasn't just keys or anything like that. There were desk attendants, and anytime we had guests, we had to like sign them in and they had to turn in their IDs, and it was a whole thing, which made any sort of dating or hooking up scenario pretty awkward because it's like, hey, like you could be at a club, at a party, at a bar, and it's like, hey, baby, like things are going pretty hot and heavy. You know what this needs? A paper trail. Like, we've only been in the dark, so let's now go stand in a fluorescently lit lobby while the desk attendant is just silently judging us while they're filling out the form. And like, you hand them your ID, a piece of government information, a government document. And then once we get past that, sexy scenario, we can go on upstairs and hop up onto my lofted twin XL mattress wrapped in plastic and like see what we can get going there. Yeah, it's just not a very sexy scenario is all I'm saying. Um, but I live in Los Angeles now. It's going pretty good. I do have a little bit of seasonal depression. It is year round, but it does get better briefly when I eat Mexican food. So there's that. Despite enjoying Mexican food, I do still go to Chipotle. But one time I was at Chipotle in line, and then the guy behind me starts talking about how he ate at Chipotle once and got food poisoning so severe it put him in the hospital overnight. Can you believe that? He had that experience and then he came back to Chipotle, right? And it's like I heard him talk about that experience and I stayed in line at Chipotle. So like we were the type of people I think who 50,000 years ago, we would have eaten the poisonous mushrooms, like just on the off chance that it got us high. Basically, that's what we got from that. Uh, I have one last, little observation about myself that I'll leave you guys with. So I had offered to cat sit for a friend of mine, and we were working out some of the logistics, and like one of the days wasn't going to work. So I was like, do you think the cat could come stay with me just like for a day so that I can, go to work? And she was like, no, I'm so sorry. Indoor cats don't do well in new environments like that. And I thought about it and I'm like, I think I might be an indoor cat, because my safe space is essentially my 400 square foot studio apartment. I'm pretty slow to approach people at first. And if you ever touch my belly, I will claw your eyes out. All right. So that's been everything from me. My name is Lilly Cohen, and my Instagram handle is @Lilly Cohen Comedy. Follow if you liked what you saw today, and thank you so much.